Hello and welcome to the Rask Network. What you're about to hear and see is limited to general financial information only. Please be sure to speak to your financial planner or refer to our financial services guide available at rask.com.au/FSG before acting on the information.
Hello and welcome back to the Australian Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Kate Campbell, and today I'm talking to the wonderful Karen Eley, who's a money coach, a former financial advisor, and all-round wizard when it comes to why sometimes we find it so hard to take action with our money. We might know everything that we need to do, but sometimes there's a block. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about 7 of those really common blocks that can get us a bit stuck when it comes to moving forward with our finances. So should be a fun episode and hopefully lots for everyone to take away. Karen, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Kate. Thanks for having me.
It is wonderful to have you here in our Melbourne studio. You've been on the podcast quite a few times before, so we've talked about lots of different topics and a lot of those juicy topics that people want to get into, like how do I talk to my partner about money? They don't want to have a discussion with me. And how do I understand my history of money and why is that stopping me taking positive actions today? So I'll link those episodes in the show notes if anyone wants to go back and listen to your catalogue. But can you give us a little intro into who you are and your role as a money coach? Because listeners might not be that familiar.
Yeah, sure, Kate. So I was a financial advisor for 16 years and I was always really curious about why people do what they do with money. So we give them a rational, logical plan. But what I've come to learn is that money's rational and logical, but us human beings are more emotional. So I got really curious about the psychology of money and went on to study that and then decided to move into that space rather than financial advising. So I refer to myself as a behavioural money coach. So it's really around exploring our relationship with money. And our relationship is based on how we think about it, how we feel about it, which then forms our actions and our behaviours. And Kate, you know that whatever we do with our money creates our financial results, whether they be positive or more challenging. So I help people unpack what their relationship with money is and then to help improve it if they do have some challenges when it comes to managing money.
It's such an interesting area because many of us at the start of our journey when we're just going, I need to sort my super out, I need to start investing, I need to sort out my budget because I have this goal. We don't think about that behavior or that emotional side. We just think about what do I need to learn and what do I need to do to get to X, Y, Z. And it's only often until later when we realize something's not working or there's a reason we can't move forward that we start to go, hey, maybe my psychology, my mindset, my emotions has something to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when people say to me, I want to learn how to manage my money, and I kind of take the approach of before you learn about money, you really need to learn about yourself. So what are some of those natural tendencies that you have towards money, how you think about it, how you feel about it, the most common emotions that come up for you? Learn more about yourself relative to money, and then let's have a look at, well, how do we do a cash flow? How do we invest? How do we learn about our superannuation, things like that?
So if we do want to learn a bit more about ourselves and our relationship to money and how that's developed, we've talked about this concept of the money story before on the podcast, but I think it's worth unpacking again because it definitely interacts with what we want to discuss in this episode, which are those mindset blocks that stop us moving forward. I'm listening. I want to know my relationship with money. I want to think about my money story. How do we start to go about unpacking that?
So the easiest and most effective way is to actually write it out on a pen and paper or a Word doc and just reflect back on what was money like for me growing up. So what's the earliest memory that I have around money? And it might be 5 years old, getting pocket money. Maybe everyone else got pocket money and I didn't get pocket money. School banking, getting money to go to the shop, earning money. Just start thinking about all of those memories that you had and those experiences that you had and just keep going from there. So just write out the first ones that you had through your 10, 12, 15 years old, 20 years old, and you just want to kind of write out this whole narrative around what was money like? What is my money story? So that's a really good way to get familiar with those main things that you experience, those themes that you'll identify. So when we write it all out and see it outside of our head, we can see certain themes, and I see it all the time. So when I work with people, I get them to do this exercise and I get them to spend a lot of time on it. So I really want them to reflect, and quite often people won't be able to remember. So you really need to put some time to reflect on it and really think about going back through your childhood. What was money like for me? What did I experience? What did I have? What didn't I have? What did my parents say about money? What was our family like relative to other families that we grew up with? So it's about just exploring all of those dynamics. And then from there, you can have a look and you'll see certain themes playing out through your teenage years, your 20s, maybe your 30s if you're that old and older. And I could go right up to my 50s. Yeah, and it's about what are those themes? What are those common things that just keep happening over and over? And what I know to be true, that those themes will be based on certain beliefs or blocks that you have around money.
What are some of the common themes that you see with your clients popping out when they're writing this money story?
So the most common theme is like, oh, wow, I'd never really thought about that. Like, and it might be something like, oh, I just spent all my money. Like whenever I got money, I just blow it at the candy shop, and then I just continue that with records and tapes and things like that. It might be things around, my money got taken away from me. Like I used to save my money and my sibling used to nick it or something like that. Or there wasn't much money. So I remember mum and dad arguing and being really stressed about there just not being enough money. So there's lots of different common themes that tend to come up. And you just want to explore and have a think about and reflect on those, because what psychology tells us is that the way that we are with money was formed between the ages of 2 and 12. And there's studies to show that money patterns and behaviours are formed by the age of 7. But working with clients, I see if you can reflect on those ages between 2 and 12, and you may not remember back to 2, most people are kind of like 5 or 6 years old, that 5 to 6 years old to 12, whatever occurred then, you formed certain beliefs and you told yourself certain stories about money. And the challenge with that, Kate, is that our brain is still forming in those really informative years about our brain. So it doesn't have the full capacity. So it's very much you're forming a belief about money and finances using a very childlike, immature brain. But the problem is that stays stuck in our brain and we continue telling ourselves that story even as adults.
So it's kind of getting those invisible scripts from inside our head that are impacting the decisions we make and bringing them out into the light. By writing them down and thinking about them and reflecting on them, we might start to understand why we're doing the things we're doing.
Exactly right, Kate. Yeah, so it's about making the invisible visible. And some of us will have certain beliefs about money and we're very conscious of them. We're very aware of those, and we'll talk about some of those. But then most of them, and the ones that are the most damaging, are the ones that we have no awareness of. But by actually writing out your story and what you experienced in your memories, you're going to start to be able to join the dots about, well, what did I make that certain event mean? What was the meaning that I attached to that? And that'll give you a really big clue around your belief around certain things when it comes to money.
I can imagine this exercise might take a few goes to get all of this stuff out. You might have to keep coming back to it. You might need to talk to your siblings, your parents, your friends about that time in your life.
Absolutely. So I thoroughly recommend starting the exercise. That's why I get people to do it in a Word document, save it, leave it for a couple of days, come back to it, fill in a couple more, just make it a work in progress over several days or a week. And just be really mindful of when you do ask parents or siblings around, oh, remember this event, because it's your perception of that event. So your sibling or your parents will have a very different perception of the event. So you don't want their interpretation to cloud what you made it mean.
That's a good point as well, because I have some family members that grew up in the same household, but they have completely different recollections of what happened during their childhood. And it's fascinating. And I know there's a lot of psychology that goes into that, but you can have completely different experiences of the same factual event, I guess.
That's the beauty of our brains, isn't it?
All right. So once we've done this money story and we've started to look at some of these themes coming up, and we might identify some common threads. And these are often coming up in these mindset blocks that you've spoken about to me before this episode, but I'm keen to share them with everyone today. What are some of the most common blocks that you're seeing that pop up with your clients?
So I distill it down to 7. There's 7 main themes that I see. And look, they can play out in different ways. The theme's the same, but the story behind it will be very unique to that individual. So the first one is, and I should say these blocks or themes, as I said before, some of them are visible and then we are aware of them, and others of them aren't visible or we don't have a conscious awareness about it. So the first one, it's one of these ones that can be invisible, is that money isn't safe. So they've got this invisible belief that there's something dangerous or unsafe about money. And there's a couple of reasons why that might come to be, Kate. So one of those is that maybe they saw their parents fight about money. So money causes arguments, and so it's really unsafe. Or maybe that an individual was given money and they lost it. They had a responsibility to go and buy something, maybe some bread at the shop or something, and they lost the money and they got into trouble for it. They got severely, told off or punished for it. And so a child might think that, well, money's not safe. Like, it gets me into trouble. And just like when we have these situations that kind of feel unsafe, it's almost like the same analogy of what happens with our brain is to, if we were young and we open the oven and we grab a hot oven tray and we burn ourselves on it, like our neural processing, our neurons in our brain will fire and wire because that really hurt, and we'll say, ouch, like a hot oven is really dangerous.
I'm not going to do that
I'm
again.
not going to do that again. And we do the same thing with money. So if we have one of those, ouch, money hurt me or it hurt my family or I got into trouble for it, I want to avoid it. Money is not safe.
And so how might this be playing out now as an adult? Because I can imagine, based off what you're saying, that might be someone who is scared of talking to their partner or their friends or family about money.
Yeah, that's right. That dynamic does play out with partnerships. So if someone's avoiding wanting to have a conversation with you about money or they find it really stressful, that might be their unconscious, invisible belief that money's not safe. And so they've got a real significant block to it, so much so, Kate, that they'll have like a physical reaction to it. It's kind of like, that their hand's approaching that hot oven and they just want to back. They'll have that same dynamic play out when it comes to having a conversation about money, or it might be looking at their bank balance like they've just got a real physical aversion to it because that's what they believe, that it's not safe.
Yeah, we've had listeners write in before when they're trying to talk to their partner or their friends about money and they just do not want to bar of it. They don't want to engage in that discussion. And often the question to us is, how do I get them interested or involved with the finances?
And then it's about asking them, if you can identify someone that you love that really does have that aversion, just ask them, what's your fear relative to money? And it'll be something that they will be very aware of, like I fear that I'm going to make a mistake, or I'm going to be told I'm stupid, or some other reason, that there'll be a fear there. And so what we want to do is we want to bring it out to light so you can support the person with that particular fear that they have around that. Because those fears our brain likes to catastrophize things. So it's often quite not really a rational, logical fear. It's just an emotional one that we've created. And so it's about supporting that person. But just come out and say, oh, that's silly. That's not going to be helpful.
Yeah.
It's about acknowledging, I really acknowledge and validate this fear and I know it's really real for you. How can we kind of work around that?
Yeah, and that we can have a conversation about money. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tricky, but I'm going to stay. I'm not going to run away from you if you say something that I don't want to hear.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Now, the second block is quite interesting. You've written, you have to work really hard to get money.
So this is one of those ones that tends to be more visible. So, yeah, you have to work hard to get money. So, and that might have been formed growing up seeing both parents or one parent working really hard. So they work really long hours for maybe not much money or maybe a lot of money, but it was involved in working for it. And unfortunately, a lot of parents have like this reward compensation system and things like, well, if you work really hard and get good grades, I'm going to give you $50 for an A or things like that. So
I think my mum did that.
so we can kind of be rewarded from that. And it's like, oh yeah, I worked really hard. I was a really good girl.
Performance was connected to praise, even if it was just verbal praise.
Yeah, that's right. So there's a couple of different dynamics where that can play out. And look, it's all well and good to be a hard worker, have a great work ethic, and be financially rewarded for that. I'm all for that. Where it can cause a block, Kate, is if someone's wanting to start investing, and we all encourage people to invest so they can grow their wealth. But if they've got this belief, this really strong belief attached to you need to work hard for money, and we're telling someone, well, you can create a passive income and make money while you sleep, there's going to be a real disconnect there. And so sometimes that can get in the way of actually someone starting to invest because they're so hardwired and conditioned that, no, I need to work hard. I really need to put in the hours and the effort. Money's just not going to come easy to me like it can potentially with investing. So that's what we want to be really aware of. So it can work for us, but it can also work against us.
I feel that one also plays out when you're viewing other people's success with money, because you might see someone who's done very well with investing or bought a property and it's gone up significantly in value, and you go, well, they didn't work hard for that in the same way that I'm working hard by putting in 50 hours a week in my job right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we do a lot of, Kate, don't we? We compare ourselves to others, and we're all on our own journey around that. So we want to be really mindful of, we don't know what's going on in other aspects of their life or their finances as well. So we don't want to kind of fall in that trap of comparing.
Yeah, because we only compare what we see on the surface. We don't know if they started 100 meters ahead or behind of us on our own financial journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the next one you have is, I'm not worthy of money and other people are more worthy than me.
This is one of those invisible ones, and it's probably the most common one that I see, Kate. So when we grow up, and this is one dynamic that I see quite a lot, that you grow up with not as many financial resources as other people did, and you can feel like, well, and I see it in clients' stories all the time, we grew up poor. I'm like, well, how do you know what poor is? What does poor mean to you? So you can be really rich in other areas, like you got lots of love and attention and support, but financially we were poor, and we kind of have that. We had less than others. And sadly, growing up, children quite often fall into the trap of, if I don't have enough, I'm not enough. Or if others have more than me, others are better than me. And so we can have this really strong belief around that. And I see it play out in all shapes and forms. I was talking to someone the other day, and we were going through their story, and they just felt really poor, they didn't have as much as others growing up. And they had a lot of sadness and guilt around, well, I don't want to ask my parents for things because they don't have it. And so sometimes we can form this strategy of forgoing our own needs because we take on the burden and the stress of our parents. And so we don't want to stress them out more by asking for things. And this particular person, it was a long time ago, some listeners might remember Cabbage Patch dolls. So these Cabbage Patch dolls. And so this particular client really wanted this doll. And she got one for Christmas, but her parents not having great financial resources, they bought a fake one. And so she took her doll to school, and one of the kids pulled the nappy off the doll, and apparently that's how you tell if it's a fake one or not. And she was completely...
That sounds terrifying.
I know. And she was
pulling
completely...
nappies off dolls.
That's cool. And I shouldn't laugh because it was a really painful memory for her. She was shamed. It's like, oh, this is a fake one. Like, you're not good enough. And she had so much shame around that. And so we can have these like little defining moments that really shape our worthiness.
And how might that be playing out now for us as adults?
Lots of different ways. So it might be playing out that you don't ask for what you're worth in terms of a salary. You'll overwork. Other people's needs are more important than mine. So even though I want this thing, I'm going to sacrifice it so I can give my spouse something, or my children something, or another family member something. We're not as important as other people, or we're not worthy of wealth. And sometimes even when we're really independent and we earn our own money and we start to grow it in some shape or form, it'll be taken away from us, or we'll lose it, or we'll need to use it for something else because deep down we never really felt like we deserved it in the first place.
Right. So we might, even without knowing it, be sabotaging any attempts we make to get ahead financially because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes that sabotage is just avoidance. Like, even though we've got the means to invest or do something wise with our money, that undercurrent there is like, oh, I'm not worthy, so I'm not even going to bother trying.
How do people overcome this one? Because I think this seems very attached to our past.
It is. Yeah, we create that identity about ourselves. I am. As soon as I am something, we really identify that with us as our identity, as our personality. So, and these things just don't happen overnight, Kate. Like, they happen over years and years of conditioning, of being told certain things, of being treated certain ways. And unfortunately, it can take a long time to unravel that. But what we know about with neuroplasticity, we can do synaptic pruning and we can change those. But it's about being conscious about the origin of where you decided that you weren't enough, and to start telling yourself, well, I am enough. I'm worthy of wealth. I'm worthy of receiving more. I'm of value. And just telling ourselves that over and over again every day. So we're now starting to connect new neural pathways to not one of I'm not worthy or I'm unworthy, to one that I am worthy. And starting there, we just want to start with small but significant steps to help us overcome those beliefs that we formed and create new ones, more positive ones.
I like that. All right, the next one is there's never enough. So the scarcity mindset that we've spoken about in different psychological episodes.
Yeah, so this one is typically formed by growing up real life, that there just wasn't enough. Sometimes there wasn't enough for food at the end of the fortnight. It's really that scarcity mindset. And when we grow up in that environment, it can be very stressful and we go without a lot. Or sometimes I even see that scarcity around people or families that did have money, but they would be told as children, we can't afford that. And I've seen money stories of clients that had parents that had paid off their mortgage. Maybe they had an investment property, but they were still in that scarcity mindset of, no, we can't afford that. No, we're not going on that holiday. And so when you hear that over and over again, you do start to believe that, well, we don't have enough. And what I say to people is that the way that we feel about money and think about money is completely uncorrelated to how much we earn or how much we have. So I was working with someone last week and they earn six-figure salary. They've got 2 investment properties and a really good healthy superannuation. They're in their 50s, but they still have this scarcity mindset that it's not enough. And so someone just telling them, you've got more than enough, you're going to be okay, you don't need to be stressed about money, that is not going to change their belief about it.
And I've seen this belief pop up with grandparent generation that lived through World War II because there wasn't enough and there was always that scarcity of resources and you never knew when the next resource would be available. And that mindset has stayed with them their entire life, regardless of, as you said, how well they're doing financially.
And so the antidote or remedy for that one, Kate, is rather than our brain focusing on what we don't have, we want to start to train it to look positively and have gratitude and appreciation. So, and that's where I started with these clients. Like, okay, what can we be grateful for? What do we have? We want to retrain our brain to say, I'm really grateful that I do have this superannuation balance, that it's going to continue to grow. I'm really thankful that I can have healthy food every day and put clothes on my children and things like that. We want to train our brain to look at the things that we do have rather than the things that we don't have.
It's so easy to get caught in that trap of thinking you always need more, you never have enough. And as you said, sometimes it's just looking at the financial progress we have made and what we have done with our finances and going, hey, that's pretty amazing. I'm in a much better position than I was 12 months ago. I might not be that person on Instagram with $1 million, but hey, I've made significant progress and done a lot of good with my own finances, and that's what matters.
Absolutely. And we need to be really proactive with that because our brain is instinctively hardwired to look out for danger and to keep us safe. And to look out for danger is to be focused on the fears. What's that thing that's going to come up and trip me up? Or do I have enough? I don't have enough. So we need to override those instinctive, primitive parts of our brain that just want to keep us focused on the fears.
All right. The next one you have is money causes problems.
Yeah. So this is one of those ones that tends to be a bit invisible, but when you reflect on your story, it'll be easy to identify. So this might be something like parents, mum and dad were always fighting about money. So it just causes problems. It's the biggest cause of arguments. Another one might be that you grew up in our family and life was really good. Like we didn't have a lot, but everything was fine. All my needs were taken care of. And then mum or dad got a promotion. We moved suburbs. We started going to private schools. We had a lot of money, but we lost other things. So there was a cost to having more money. And those are those invisible ones that we tend not to actually join the dots and connect, that money causes problems.
That's very interesting. So it might be something that occurs in your money story if there's a lifestyle inflation, but also, I don't know what the opposite of that is, deflation. If you have to leave a private school and go into a different school because your parents have lost a job or something like that. That's a big shock for a child either way, I would think.
Absolutely. And a parent lost a job or marriage separation, because we've had a lot too. And so the family unit might have been really good, comfortable financially. And then when the resources are separated, typically one parent comes off a little bit worse off than the other. And so then that can cause a lot of problems and different dynamics there too. And that stays with the children. Again, they take on the stress of the parents. And money causes problems. There was one client that reflected when she did her story and her parents separated. Her sister was a bit older than her, and she went into our room after they'd moved into their new house, and she was on her bed crying. And she couldn't understand why her sister was crying, her older sister. And she's like, well, everything's changed. We don't have enough money now. And she decided that, well, I'm never going to let money make me sad. That's so silly. So we can take away good things, but we can also take away challenging things. And again, like you said, it's different, same family, different perceptions of those experiences.
Two siblings might have come out of a family separation or having to move house with two very different experiences. So interesting. All right. The sixth one is when I get money, it will be taken away from me. It's an interesting one because I don't think I've ever considered that.
Yeah. Well, this was actually mine, Kate.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways that this one can play out that I typically see. So the first one is which was mine. It's like putting savings away and then someone taking it away from you. So money being stolen. So I just get ahead and then the money's taken away from me. Or maybe a house was broken into. Another way that can play out is things are going really good and then all of a sudden parents lose a job. Or I see this one too, and it's sometimes difficult to connect to money, but when a child grows up and they move houses a lot, so with parents that move for their job, and when I say move, I mean moved interstate or move overseas, and so it's really hard for kids to go to school, start new friends, and things just start to get good, and then it all gets taken away. And then they've got to start all over again. And sometimes we can intertwine that with our money as well, or when there's been significant loss. So parents or family members go through that roller coaster of those booms and busts. And so typically how that plays out as an adult is that even when things start to go well, that person is, all right, I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop, or the rug's going to be taken out, because it's happened so many times in their past. And they're just waiting for that. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when we focus on that.
You raised an interesting point there that it might have been an experience in our past that has nothing to do with money on the surface. So maybe we had to move every 2 years because our parents were in the military or in a very transient industry. And that might, on the surface, when you're writing your money story, you might think, well, this has nothing to do with money. I didn't have to pay anything. There wasn't really a cost, but there is a cost. And it might not be financial on its surface, but that can impact our money.
Absolutely. And I also see it play out with children that were abused as well. So whilst there wasn't money attached to it, it really impacts their worthiness and their self-esteem, which can then fall back into their finances as well, and in terms of not feeling worthy, having low self-esteem and confidence, and that can impact their financial outcomes as well.
How do we change our mindset on this one and think that, well, when I get money, it won't be taken away from me? I get to keep that. I get to build wealth for myself and my family.
Yeah. So that's changing the narrative around it's safe to save. I can protect my money. When money comes in, I'm going to look after it and it's going to stay around. So whatever the story was for you, we want to create a healthier version of it. So whilst the theme's the same, we want to have it relate really to our specific situation. And it's almost like creating a healthy opposite of that story or belief that you have.
And just thinking, well, things can actually work out.
Yeah.
I can change the way I interact with money and I can start to nurture my own wealth.
And sometimes when we've got that one, well, money causes problems. So we're so used to experiencing that. So now what we need to do is find evidence of where money's been used for good. So we need to build up that evidence to back that belief. So if someone believes that money causes problems and it's bad, just telling them to say, oh, money's good is not going to work. So they need to find that evidence to support that new belief that they're having.
Okay. Now the final one, and I hear this so often, so I feel like this was probably a more visible one as well, is I'm not good with money.
Yes, that is one of the visible ones. We're very aware of that and we tell ourselves that every day. We tell other people, oh, I'm just not really good with money. So we've got to stop there, but let's find out how it was formed. Why do we decide that we're not good at money? So there's a couple of different ones that play out. The most typical one I see, sadly, is that they weren't good at maths at school.
It's still such a common belief that
It is.
I need to be great at algebra to be able to invest. And it's just not true.
Yeah, it's just not true. And I will share, I barely passed year 10 maths. I was in the basic maths. You know how they start to scale you and grade you as the good maths, the smart maths, the medium maths, and the dumb maths.
It's so mean. That gets stuck in your head. Like I remember at school that, people would be in, they'd call it dumb maths. And that's just.
Yeah. So I was in the dumb maths class in year 10 and just barely scraped through. And then I went on to run a very successful financial planning practice. I did an accounting degree. It doesn't need to be that way. Like the maths and algebra and all those crazy things, if you can understand compound interest, that is the basis that you need.
And you don't even need to understand the maths. You just need to understand the concept. And you can use the Money Smart calculator to do the calculations. It's not like you need to do the formula yourself. You just need to be able to understand the concept. And that's words and visualizations. It isn't necessarily, I understand this equation and can perform it over 10 different times.
So I'm speaking to all of you people now that I'm not good at money because I'm not good at maths. I've got a lot of empathy for you because none of us were taught how to manage money at school. And so if you didn't have parents that talk about it or good at themselves, where are you supposed to learn? And it's okay. Now you can learn. And it's about just taking really small steps and being in an environment that's safe where you feel not stupid, that you can go to someone or be in a community where it's okay to start from scratch. There's so much assumed knowledge in financial terms, but where are we ever taught the basics?
I guess that's something we've been trying to change with all of our
Absolutely.
free investing courses on Rask Education and our podcast here, because no one tells you what an ETF is. And I probably didn't want to know what an ETF was when I was 13 and in high school. And I learned about it bit by bit when I was an adult. And once I had some money to invest and I slowly figured out, hey, it's not too complicated. It's just a basket of companies tied up in a bow that I can invest in. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need to know maths. You just need to know some common bits and pieces. And while you might not be making great financial decisions now, there's nothing to stop you making a slightly better decision today and tomorrow. And it's just about that small incremental progress.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really bad at maths, so I'm not good at money. The other typical one that I see is that parents actually saying, Kate, as soon as she gets her pocket money, she blows it. She's terrible with money. Money just slips through her fingers. And when we hear that over and over again, or we're made fun of, or we're the butt of everyone's financial joke in the family, we start to believe it.
I also see it play out with parents and kids where you're spending your money on something that they don't see as important. And so they're saying, oh, she's wasting her money on this magazine. When I was a kid, I don't buy magazines, but I liked magazines when I was a kid, wasting her money on magazines or buying things from Priceline because they didn't value that. And that's a really interesting one to unpack as well, because so often when people say they're wasting their money, it's because they're spending money on something that's not of value to the person that's saying that statement.
Exactly. I always say any money conversation is a values conversation. So we need to be really mindful when we criticize or judge other people's financial decisions, because we're criticizing their values, and we want to respect that everyone has their own values and be really mindful of that.
Yeah. And it's if you are a parent, it's good to think about the language you're using when you're speaking to your child about money.
Absolutely. And parents, mum and dad, or whoever the caregivers are, need to be on the same page, same message, because that is another one of those complex things in money stories, that one parent was one way when it came to money and said one thing, and the other parent was the other way. We look to our parents to model our own behaviour, and where there's a contradiction and conflict, it creates enormous confusion for a child. And so sometimes that can be around that, well, I'm just not good with money. I don't understand it, because there were two very different role models of money.
Do you think hearing about everyone's money stories and how their experiences growing up have positively or negatively impacted their finances has changed the way you parent?
Absolutely.
I mean, that was a leading question. I was pretty certain it would have.
Yeah, absolutely. So my children are 12 and 14. And so I really became conscious of this work probably about 7-8 years ago. And yeah, I kind of like, what have I done to my children? And so now it's about being course correcting, about changing some of those messaging that I had, because I was pretty much, I'd say something, words would come out of my mouth, and it's like, oh my God, it was just my mum coming out my mouth. I can just hear them speaking for me. So I was conditioned to be a certain way, and there were some things that were really helpful. My mum never had credit cards or debt, so that was a really positive thing that I took away, but there were some really challenging ones too. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't impose those on my children. So, and the good thing is with neuroplasticity, and we can change, and consistency over time in years, I've been able to course correct and change some of that language and messaging that I created for them.
And it's interesting if you hear that phrase coming out and go, oh, that really sounds like my parent. And then you can reflect on that and like, is that a positive message or a not so positive message? And maybe I want to focus on saying something else. And that might also help you with unpacking your money story that we talked about earlier. Are you repeating a mindset that might not be serving you that you got given from your parents?
Yeah, got given from your parents. And you touched earlier on generations and grandparents and going through the war. Society and marketing, they all influence our learnings and experiences as well. So we need to be mindful of what they are in different cultures.
Yeah, you've got to be ever vigilant against the big banks and all of the credit providers saying you can have it now in their advertising. I think that's going to be quite harmful for this generation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really about instant gratification, where I grew up where my mum, when she purchased them, it'd be lay-by. She'd go in and put some money on it. We wouldn't actually get the item until it was fully paid for. So very different compared to today.
Now, to tie this all up, we talked about these 7 common mindset blocks that can stop us moving forward with our finances. And they are: money isn't safe. You have to work really hard to get money. I'm not worthy of money. There's never enough money. Money causes problems. When I get money, it's going to be taken away from me. And I'm not good with money. Now, these phrases might be resonating with listeners, and maybe there's a couple there. Maybe you've thought of something else that we haven't listed, but that's popped up while you've been listening to this episode. How can we take some action from this? So we've looked at our money story. We've identified one of these mindset blocks. What can we do to start taking action?
So the first step is around, you've been telling yourself that, and sometimes you weren't even aware that you're telling yourself that. It's creating a new narrative. So if money isn't safe, you need to start telling yourself, it's money is safe, that I'm protected, all is well, I can look after my money, and just start telling ourselves that over and over again. We need to have that repetition and consistency. And that might play out something like writing it out several times a day. When you're brushing your teeth in the morning in the mirror, just telling yourself that to yourself in the mirror, writing it down, having it as a screensaver. You just want to be able to see it several times a day to start to change and create new neural pathways around those beliefs. Now, quite often, those beliefs that we have or those blocks, we've got the language that we use, but then we've also got emotions attached to it as well. And so some of those emotions might be fear, anxiety, shame, guilt. We want to identify those emotions and then really think about what emotions do we want to experience instead. And that might be gratitude or abundance or forgiveness or compassion. Compassion for ourselves most of the time. So when we make money mistakes, we can be so hard on ourselves. I should have done this. I should have done that. So compassion and self-love. And then we just want to start synthesizing that feeling in our body because our body's not used to it. So it might seem weird, but we kind of need to fake it until we make it. And so it's like, I'm going to start to, rather than look at scarcity, abundance. I'm going to start to feel abundant. And that might be just doing something really small, like an abundant thing might be buying myself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and that's an abundant thing for me. I think I've shared it before. Having fresh flowers in the house is like my abundance. Just something that's really makes life feel abundant, and we just want to experience that over and over again until those other challenging emotions start to dissipate. But again, it's not a one and done. It's doing that repetitively and consistently.
So we want to be doing this really important mindset and behaviour work while we're doing all of the other learning about the basics of our finances and getting our super on track and starting to invest.
Yeah, I see when I work with clients, I talk about 3 pillars. So the first pillar is our thoughts, our mindset, those beliefs that we have. The second pillar is our emotions, like how we feel about it. And the third is a practical. You can't just kind of start telling yourself something and feeling something that doesn't really feel right anyway without taking practical steps. So all of the things that you share on your podcast is taking those small but significant steps to changing the way. So if you feel like I'm not good at money, I don't know how, I don't have confidence. Well, confidence comes through taking action. So you might say, so rather than going from I'm not good with money to changing that and saying I am good with money, there could be some cognitive dissonance there because we're really deeply hardwired to believe I'm not good at money. So just by saying and writing down I'm good at money is not going to change anything. So it could be something like I'm learning to be better with money. Confidence comes through action. I'm taking action with my money. And we start to do those small things. And it might be about doing a cash flow audit and seeing where our money's going. Where's that surplus? How can we do something different with it? So it's those 3 pillars. It's the mindset, it's the emotions, and sometimes meditation can be really helpful, or even breathing to calm the nervous system down if we've got the stress, but then also taking action. We need to do all 3 together.
Yes, taking action is so important and building that body of evidence that you are the person that you want to become. Yeah, that is so important. Well, Karen, this has been such an impactful episode. I think everyone will have something they can take away from this, or share it with a loved one or a wonderful friend or a colleague, because this is stuff that most of us need to work on. I'm sure everyone has one of these that are just niggling at the back of their mind, even if they're not aware of it. So thank you so much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kate.
Now, if people stick around next week on the podcast, we're going to be talking to Karen about having a money conversation with your partner, having a money date. We're going to go through a practical exercise you can do with your partner. So make sure to tune into that because Karen is a wealth of knowledge. Well, thank you for listening today and look forward to seeing you on the next podcast.
Thanks for watching this video on the Rask Network. While you're here, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get videos each and every day on business, finance, investing, and so much more.